think we can get going. I'm gonna hit pause on this. If you're just joining us, please make sure that you say hello to us in the chat. Let us know where you're calling in from. We also have this poll going so we can get an idea of everybody's backcountry education. Hi, everyone. I'm Jen Gurecki. I'm the CEO of Coalition Snow. Thank you for being here. For everyone who I see who's in the Sierra, fuck yeah, it's snowing. Who's pumped? Anybody? Anybody? Okay. Super excited that we finally have some snow. Today we have Catherine from TREW Gear and Evan, who is a Coalition Snow ambassador, who are going to be joining us to have this discussion today. How this is going to work is I'm going to be moderating. We have some questions that we've prepared, and Catherine and Evan are going to be answering them. Within each sort of like topic that we have built out, we'll open it up for Q&A. So if you have a question, pop it in the chat and we'll get to those. And then when we get to the time where if it's just open Q&A, you can unmute and you can chat. If you're not talking, please make sure that you're muted. We just want to say that this event series, Coalition and TREW Gear came together to create this so that we could build community and sort of like recreate some of the experiences that we might be having in real life this winter. This in no way replaces formal avalanche education, and we encourage everybody to go out and get that formal avalanche education. But this is ideally a safe space for people where you can ask any question that you want to. There's no dumb questions at all. You can connect with other people who are here on the call. And then remember, everyone here is also in the Clubhouse. So you can always reach back out to Evan or Catherine or myself or anyone else to follow up on anything. So let me turn it over. I'll first turn it over to Evan. Evan, you can introduce yourself, say hello, and then we'll go to Catherine, and then we will launch into our first question.
Cool. Hey, everyone, I'm Evan. Excuse my voice. I have COVID right now, but sounds a little sexy, you know. I use she, her pronouns, and I am located here in Breckenridge, Colorado. I saw that there was some other Colorado people. We're not getting as much snow as in your parts, Jen, but it's okay. Super excited to have this series, and TREW Gear is awesome, and so is Coalition and Jen, and I love being a part of the Coalition crew. So that's me.
Cool. Hi guys. I will be the first person to say that I am working on my gender neutral greetings. Hello folks. Hello everyone. Please excuse me. My name is Catherine. I work at TREW Gear. My pronouns are she and her. I am the operations manager at TREW, and we are just over the moon to be working with Coalition on just helping get more people out into the backcountry and feel comfortable about approaching what's typically seen as a very intimidating sport. And Coalition is just, I mean, you guys know, you're all part of the Clubhouse. It really is just a fantastic community and really encouraging, and I hope that that shines through in tonight's event. I'm located in Portland, Oregon, so I call Mount Hood kind of my home base. I'm pretty much only into backcountry skiing at this point because I am cheap and don't like spending money on lift tickets. I have my ARI 1, and I've taught some intro classes and shadowed a bunch and just really love backcountry. So that's my experience.
Awesome. And I just, before I dive into the first question, I'm going to end the poll, but I think this is really interesting. 42% of you have informal education through friends. 40% of you have your ARI 1. That's the most. And then after that, it's short workshops. So we definitely have a range of people here. I myself have my ARI 1 and my ARI 2. But I'm really like, I'm pretty bad at skinning. So like, I'm just not very good at it, but I love being outside. So it's great to be here with all of you. So I'm going to end this poll. I'm going to jump into the first question. So the three of us spent some time early this week going over what we wanted to talk about. And we kind of broke it out in some bigger buckets around finding backcountry partners, understanding risk tolerance, backcountry etiquette, decision-making, the communication part of etiquette, and terrain traps, red flags. So our goal is to get through as much as we can tonight. I'll be presenting questions and then trying to keep us sort of moving along. If there's things that we don't get to, we actually haven't planned the topic yet for the next event. So if there's things we don't get to here in any of the series, feel free to reach out on the Clubhouse or pop it in the chat and we can always add that to the next event. So, but let's jump in. So the first question we have is sort of like this big question: how do you find backcountry partners? And within that question is like, where do you literally find them? Like, where can you find the humans? But then also, once you find that human, how do you sort of vet them and make sure that you're with a partner who you're going to feel really comfortable with? So that's the first question.
Evan, I'll let you kick it off.
Okay. So kind of the where do you find them? And this is like, I have not that many backcountry partners because I don't trust a ton of people in the backcountry or know that many people in the backcountry. But I'd say like one of them is just she's one of my best friends. And so if you have friends who you trust, because having people in the backcountry that you trust is like number one priority. So if you have friends that do it, like that would be my number one. And if you don't know anyone who does it, the other place I've met people who did it is in either formal or informal training environments. I met some in my Area 1 that have been great partners. And then also just at like info nights at, we have like a local shop called Mountain Outfitters and they do the know before you go. And so at those sort of events, you can seek out people who hopefully are aligned in the same backcountry wants as you, which we'll also get into that. But I'd say like kind of my preference is meeting the person and first and then wanting to have a further relationship within like the backcountry with them.
Yeah, I think, obviously in-person events are a great way to find people, especially going to those know before you go or intro to avalanche seminars that a lot of places here in Portland, I know Evo puts them on typically. And, but obviously we are in the world of COVID at the moment, and which is why we're all at this virtual event. And so things are a little bit different. And I think, honestly, Jen and Coalition timed it great having the Clubhouse come out like right before winter, because Clubhouse is probably my number one place now to find backcountry partners. And you can go I believe you can just go into the Clubhouse and search for people near you.
Yeah. If you click on members, like in that left-hand navigation, if you click on members, it automatically will pop up everyone who's near you. And that's the easiest way to find. Then you can DM them or yeah.
So the Clubhouse is great. I do know like a lot of people go on Facebook. There's a lot of local like home-based Facebook groups that have, I know Portland and the Pacific Northwest have like a pretty massive backcountry group. And I see people linking up like constantly on there. I haven't found anyone on there, but I'd say like I've found people through She Jumps Oregon on Facebook and a lot of other kind of like-minded Facebook groups that are just catered to the backcountry, whether it's splitboarding or skiing. I think what's most important though is, you find these people who are interested in backcountry skiing or splitboarding, and then you take it to the next level and you begin to have that conversation one-on-one, which brings us to kind of the next part of you're almost vetting these people, whether, you find them on the Clubhouse, Facebook, in person. It's definitely a good idea to start getting to know them a bit more. Find out their name, find out, kind of the basic stuff, but also start digging into their experience, kind of their goals and expectations when it comes to backcountry. I mean, we kind of created a whole list of questions that you should be asking, even before you set a date and arrive at the trailhead to meet up for a tour. Let's see.
You want to go through those questions, and while you look at those questions, one thing I want to say is that I would hope that everyone would feel really comfortable with vetting the people you go out into the backcountry with. You should have no problem asking people real questions, expecting real answers. And if you get something that doesn't make you feel comfortable, then you don't go out with them. This is not the sort of outdoor activity where you just go out with anyone. So the concept of vetting, like, yeah, you are judging them 100%.
And they're judging you. It's a give and take. If you find someone online or in person and you start asking questions, a good sign is that they're asking questions back. Seeing that they're interested in getting to know you and your experience and expectations is also a good sign. It might not have always been like this, but just creating a very open and vulnerable place before you go out is definitely a really good idea, because when you are put into crazy situations, you don't know what's going to happen out there. You want to be comfortable speaking your mind and letting that person or those people know just where you're at. Otherwise, things can go bad. That's pretty much, not to scare anyone, but I mean, I think we've heard of some stories, and yeah, it's always good to just be open and vulnerable and just be honest right from the get-go.
You want to run through those questions we came up with?
Sure. Evan, do you want to jump in there?
Yes. Okay. So one of the biggest ones that, like, even before you're going out there, that seems obvious, but isn't always obvious and may not be the answer that you think it's going to be, is, have you ever been in the backcountry before? A lot of people talk about wanting to do it, they want to go with you. But that's a really important thing if someone has never been in to the backcountry. So asking if someone has, we didn't necessarily discuss this the other day, but it definitely does depend what kind of gear everyone is on. If you're going out your first time on snowshoes and the other person may be on a super light, like, ski setup, that can definitely make a difference too. And then what kind of training, if any training at all, do they have gear? So some of the questions that are going to be like, you absolutely need the gear to go out there. So some of the questions that are either going to be like yes or no, and that's going to define something. So like those pre-vetting questions before you are just like feeling the person out and seeing if it's going to be a good fit is like, is this going to be safe and all in all good experience for both parties because it's going to be safe. Am I leaving out some of those like initial kind of really important questions?
I think we had in here like understanding people's risk tolerance.
Yeah.
Right. So I think like the idea of like vetting your partner isn't necessarily that they have to be an expert, that you wouldn't go out with someone who's not an expert, is that you're trying to get to know someone so that you know what you're getting yourself into. Right. So like you might be having a conversation with someone who's far less skilled than you, and that's okay. Or they might be far more skilled than you, and that's okay. The point is to understand what may unfold in this intimate experience with another human being in the outdoors, right? So, and I think like understanding risk tolerance is a big thing. Like, I know for me, there's certain scenarios in which I'm very risk tolerant, and then there's other things that I'm not. And having that conversation in advance even helps you out before you start selecting your terrain, right? Some of the other pieces that we had in here is like what classes have you taken? So just like understanding who you're going out with. Some of the other things that we talked about, and Catherine, I'll sort of punt this over to you, is there's these conversations that you have before you even get out there, right? But then, so say you've like had conversations with this person, you're super pumped to hang out with them. Then you're actually there, you know, at the trailhead or on the snow. What are some things that you might be looking for that first time out when you're with a new person or a new handful of humans?
Sure. I mean, it's always a good idea, you know, you get out of the car and don't even start putting your stuff on. Like, just, I always try and just start a conversation and like, you know, good morning, how are you? And then kind of get back into, you know, did you check the forecast last night or this morning, depending on where you are? And like, what do you think about this? And, you know, X, Y, and Z, what issues or, you know, like, do you have any concerns, or what do you think about what we like, the weather conditions, and, you know, what's on your mind? And then kind of go over what you talked about with them beforehand. Kind of, it never hurts to go over or review kind of those talking points of, okay, let's just confirm that we're both on the same page here, before we even put on our boots and start, you know, hiking uphill. Are you okay if, you know, as we start going, maybe we take some breaks along the way and, you know, talk about the conditions, or, you know, really maybe we dig a pit up at so and so bluff, or just kind of going over a game plan. And then I really like to, especially if you do have weather events or kind of sketchy conditions to keep in mind, just going over a few what ifs, just to see how they would react. And it's usually a good indication of, you know, they might say they're really risk averse and really conservative out there, but their answers might tell you something different. So being like, you know, what if we get up above tree line and we're in whiteout conditions? What would you do? And like, how would you feel if I got to that position and wanted to turn around? I think just bringing up a couple, I don't want people to start getting like sucked down the what if wormhole, because that can definitely be dangerous and you'll probably be in the parking lot all day. But just going over a couple of those main concerns that might have been brought to light from the forecast. We're talking about, you know, if you start your descent and you see maybe some slab breaking off, you know, what would you guys do? Also, kind of playing off of that, you just want, and I think this is something you can get a good sense of even before you show up at the trailhead, but you just want to feel comfortable with that person or those people. You don't want to feel like you're being pressured or uncomfortable in any way. And, you know, in tandem with the whole, you know, I'm going to talk about communication a whole lot because I'm pretty passionate about it. But just being comfortable with, you know, just talking to them about stuff, even if it's a gear issue, or, you know, just because we've all been beginners before. And even if you're out there with a pro or a guide, you know, we've all been there, and, you know, there's no shame or nothing to be embarrassed about. If you have a question, you know, how do I pee in the bushes? How do I, like, you know, there's a lot of stuff that happens out there that people don't necessarily like to talk about. But I think just being open and feeling comfortable with that person or that group of people that you've chosen to go out with is it just kind of sets the tone. So.
Well, and I think one thing that you're starting to touch on, Catherine, is sort of like the backcountry etiquette, which is the next thing that we want to get into. So I might say your name wrong, Sienna. I'm sorry. I really love your comment here. If people are trying to shame you while you're out there, that's a red flag. I think that's a fantastic comment that's in our chat. What I'd like to move us into are some of the like specific backcountry etiquette pieces. So we've already established that communication is like probably the number one thing that you need to have going in. Evan, do you want to talk a little bit about some of the backcountry etiquette things that are really important to you, or things that you've seen? I also want to encourage everybody who's here in the chat right now. If you have backcountry etiquette tips, let's hear them. Like, put it in the chat. Let's build this out By no means are the three of us experts on any of this. We've recognized that there's a lot of people here who know quite a bit, but let's move into that etiquette piece. And Evan, if you want to kick us off, and all of you, if you want to start dropping your etiquette tips in the chat, that would be awesome.
For sure. So tied in with communication and then little anecdote, but etiquette within your group, and then also like with other people that you may see. But a lot of the things in the comments, like, you know, the shaming you and all that, like that's part of, I feel like, etiquette too within groups, is like not, if you've all decided on a plan, not to then like, oh, let's do this, like changing the plan, you know, that's not a cool thing to do on anyone. So I feel like that's kind of part of like inner group etiquette. But then also, if you come up to a group, and like right now, I'm sure I haven't really been out too much, but there's a lot of people out in the backcountry, and so you're going to see other groups, and there is going to be tricky snowpack everywhere. And like Colorado, it's always tricky all season. But asking people where they're going, and also like figuring out spacing with other groups. Like you don't want to be right on some other group's tail. And like I always let people pass me because it irritates me having anyone on my butt, even within my group. So if like someone is coming up behind you because they're fast, like just move, you know, like step out of the way. I'm not a fast skinner whatsoever. I just don't like people on my tail. So I move around, and like my friend always appreciates when I do that because she's very quick, and I'm like, yep, go for it. And then also just with like kind of skinning, don't snowshoe in the skin track, just because it chops it up and it makes it tricky for people who are on either split boards or skis, and you can make your own snowshoe trail. It'll also make the snowshoe act how it should, honestly, being on not a skin track, or the trail where your skis or your split board is sliding in and out of. Also, pack it in, pack it out. No one likes a dirty trail. And that goes for like, if you're bringing tissues into the backcountry, snacks, like all of that, you know, anything you're taking in, bring that out. And along with that, like I've seen, I mean, I know dogs are out in the backcountry and they pee, but I have literally seen people just pee on the trail. I've seen all sorts of people do it, and just step off the trail. You know, like we don't need it necessarily in the skin track. That wasn't on our list, but that came into my head because I've definitely seen it. And like clean up your dog poop. I make my dog carry their poop out. I just put it in their little backpack. What else do we have for etiquette?
This is a really good, in the chat we have from Sienna. Again, I'm sorry if I'm saying your name incorrectly. You're welcome to unmute yourself and say, this is how you say my name, Jen. Sienna, if you bring a dog, make sure that the dog doesn't chase other skiers in your group. Make sure the dog has excellent recall.
Mm-hmm.
Don't steal first track. Oh, I'm saying it right. Thank you. Okay, good. Yeah, don't steal first tracks. Catherine, do you have other things to add to that in terms of etiquette when you're out there?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely yeah, we could go on forever about, I mean, I'm sure those of you who have been in the backcountry, there's definitely pet peeves and things that you've seen people do that just grind your gears. But there are, I'd say a few more that really kind of stand at the top are, if you dig a pit or do anything, any snow testing or anything, just kind of fill it in. Definitely don't need like holes all over the place that people could fall into without seeing. I don't think it's, at least around here, I haven't had many issues with it, but people who are rocking the radio or have speakers, I'm not a huge fan about, you know, I'm out in nature for the solitude, and maybe sometimes I'll have earphone or like headphones on, but just turn it down. I don't know. And then, yeah, we have, let's see, Hillary said, avoid writing about people who are skinning below you, especially in challenging terrain, which is definite. You always want to be aware of where the other groups are. And similar to Evan did mention something of, when you do encounter, you're hiking up and you encounter another group, it's a good idea to just say hi and see what their plans are. Where are they going? Where are they planning on transitioning? What lines are they looking at? And that does kind of play into what Sherry said as well, of like, if you reach the top first, even though someone else is, they're breaking trail and you get there first, don't steal their line. There's plenty of room to share. We're in Mother Nature. There's so much room. Honestly, that plays in really well to my last one of just be nice. Overall, powder can do some crazy things to people. Honestly, it turns a lot of people into jerks. And so just be nice and be kind. Be patient. If someone's holding you up, don't get on their ass or like start tromping around on their skis. Just politely say, hey, could I pass you? I don't know. Just be nice. It does. I totally understand you wake up, it's a powder day and you're like on your way for first tracks and you can get really anxious, and that in turn could be, you could definitely start kind of taking it out on other people that you encounter. But really just remember that, it's just a day in the outdoors and you're lucky to be there regardless of if you get first tracks or not. Zoror, oh God, I'm so bad at names. I'm so sorry.
I also want to say that if you see me at Mount Rose, I swear to God, you better not have you better give me space in lift line and while we're trying to load the lift, because all you people who are like touching me, my snowboard just might accidentally like slide back and hit your skis, and I'm sorry, except for why are you a foot away from me? Like just give space. Zariah. So yeah, Zariah, you have an excellent question. Catherine, you want to answer that?
Yeah, sorry. So someone's line, meaning their descent plan, I guess. So like once they get to the top and they're switching over to start going downhill, when you go touring, you kind of have an idea of where you want to go and where you want to ski down. And their line or someone's line is kind of just their path down, which I don't. Yeah, you can have a line, like when you're resort skiing or snowboarding, you pick lines down every slope. So just picking a line, or in the case of someone's maybe stealing someone's line, that's kind of what that means.
I want to take a minute here. Like we have a bunch of other questions that the three of us prepared prior to tonight, but I'd like to open up to everybody who's on the call now, just because we're at 30-minute mark. If you have questions about anything that we've discussed or things that you'd like us to get into, feel free to unmute yourself right now and you can ask a question, and we'll just open it up to all of you for the next few minutes before we move into some of our prepared questions. So questions on what we've covered or other questions that we haven't gotten to yet.
I have a question. My name is Cameron. I am also based out of Portland, Oregon. So obviously getting into backcountry anything is a pretty expensive ordeal. And I've been snowshoeing plenty of times and getting into splitboarding, but I have kind of questions around the whole setup for a beacon, probe, shovel, all of that. Very spendy. Would you recommend, renting every single time if you are going with somebody who's really knowledgeable and, saying it's very low risk avalanche terrain? What's kind of your advice there?
Evan?
I was gonna say, you could, I know that a lot of places where I'm located in Breckenridge rent, but it is not the most affordable thing. And probably after, I don't know how many how many times renting that it would be worth your whole package. I kind of acquired my gear super sporadically and then got like a couple of things all at once on, I work for the resort, so I have certain things on discount, but you can find, I feel like a lot of stuff, used gear that's still good gear, especially shovels and probes can be the most affordable things you can find. Like a couple of those things, you don't need like a super expensive, the highest end one. Definitely with beacons, doing research to make sure that it's, you know, if someone's selling a beacon, it's not because it's a version that was either like discontinued, because beacons stay around a long time. Like people have theirs for ever. So just seeing, maybe like looking around at maybe what sort of gear people might be trading or selling, and then seeing what a rental setup would be wherever you're renting from, and then, you know, that might decide what your if it's more cost effective to rent every time or to buy it.
I just want to add too that there's so many websites now that have payment plans,
Mm.
and that payment plan might be the same amount as if you rent your gear. So this is, you know, I know that TREW Gear has a payment plan. We have a payment plan. Like we don't sell backcountry gear, but it's a thing. And look, like this is an investment. And when you buy your beacon shovel probe, you will have it for a very, very long time. So looking for payment plans on websites, I think, is a really like smart way to make it more affordable. Catherine, I'm going to let you answer in just a second. I want to acknowledge all the questions that are coming in the chat. I want to let you know that the next thing that we're jumping into is specific terrain questions. So we'll do our best to get into that. So I just want to acknowledge I'm reading all of those. But Catherine, do you have anything else about gear?
Yeah, I mean, I guess definitely agree that, you know, shovels and shovels and probes are definitely something that you can get used or secondhand. I know, you know, here in Portland we have Next Adventure, and I do believe they sell shovels used. Probes, I'm not sure they do yet, but either way, you can buy those used. And then of course beacons are the most expensive, but they are like, I just got a new beacon purely because I had one that was recalled. But I had that last one for 8 years, and now I really hope that I don't have to get another one ever again now that I have a new one. Then yeah, I know for probes, and I think just in general, but probes in particular on this point, is here in Portland or in the Pacific Northwest, we do have a coastal snowpack. So one thing that I do suggest is getting the longest probe you can get here. It's going to be different depending on where you are, but we do have 8 to 9 foot average snowpack here in the PNW. So having a 320 millimeter, 320 centimeter probe is going to be recommended. I do think Next Adventure and Evo and other rental places will have that information for you, but just I'd feel remiss if I didn't say anything, because that's probably one of the biggest things I see new people out in the backcountry with really short probes, and that's not going to do very much if you do end up in a burial situation. Let's see. Yeah, we got lots of fun
questions. I think that it might be good if we get into Terry's question about navigating group dynamics when it's a newer group and the risk probability is changing. And then after we get to Terry's question, we can get into some of this exploring new terrain, like Forrest asked. Charlie asked about resources for finding routes. So, and then I know that Margaret has a question about Ari, but let's talk about this group dynamic piece when circumstances are changing, and then talk about some of the terrain topics we had.
Sure. Okay. So All right, so Terry, I'll just read the question first. So Terry asked, I'd love to hear more about navigating group dynamics when it's a newer group and the conditions, circumstances are changing the risk probability. So this is, as I think everyone here knows, Mother Nature has a mind of her own, and things are constantly changing out there. You could start a tour and have a really relatively safe snowpack, and it's sunny and there's no wind, and throughout the day maybe the sun is melting the snow and things. There's a lot of things that can happen out there, and it's definitely, especially when you're newer, but even no matter how experienced you are, taking time to stop with your group and reevaluate what's going on around you. And this should also be, we play into group dynamics. And again, I'll just start saying the keyword communication here. Assuming you're with a group or a person who you're really comfortable with, this really shouldn't be too hard. But it's more about creating that habit of, while you're hiking up, keep looking around you. You want to be, kind of look for signs, check, even just step off of the skin track and start seeing what the snow feels like. Sometimes I just whack my pole randomly and just see kind of what the layers look like just on the top. And then, just stopping here and there and kind of assessing what's around you, having a conversation about it, and then tying it into maybe the forecast said something of, later in the day, you might see sun-baked snow or more slab prone on so-and-so aspect. It's just a good idea to keep your eye out and stop regularly and just have those conversations with whoever you're with, whether you're brand new or you're a veteran. And especially if you do have a mixed group, just saying, if you're going out there with a brand new person or vice versa, you're brand new and you're going out with a pro, don't feel uncomfortable stopping and having those conversations, because it's all about that comfort. And when you do, I think the most crucial thing that you can get out of tonight's event and just this conversation as a whole is when you stop and you reevaluate or you're making plans with your group, you should always cater to the lowest denominator, the lowest comfort level. It's all about, if Evan and I are going out on a tour and I say, I'm really not feeling that comfortable today. The snow, I just saw some slough go off, any reason at all. You don't even have to have a good reason. Maybe your legs hurt from a workout earlier this week. If you at all don't have or aren't comfortable about some sort of part of the plan, then the plan should adjust to meet that. It definitely shouldn't cater to the person who's most experienced and most risk tolerant. It should be as conservative as the person who's the least comfortable.
Evan, do you have anything that you want to add to that?
Yeah. And sometimes I think that's where it gets tricky. If you're in a group, a lot of the times, if it's I don't go out with more really than one person. And a lot of times that everyone's not always going to be on the same page. And especially with if there is changing conditions, and I'd say I don't have necessarily the answer to that, but that's when it gets tricky. And then that's when sometimes issues arise that one part of the group wants to go off another way. And you're like, well, no, we're not comfortable with that. And then that's kind of where you have to make that call for yourself. And if anyone else in the group as well is not feeling comfortable with it, saying I'm not comfortable, we're gonna, I want to turn around, or we need to further discuss this. But I'd say that's when that gets tricky, and none of us really know the exact answer, how to deal with it when not everyone is in the same page of oh, things are changing, but I still want to go do that. And this part of the group doesn't feel comfy with it. And that's never a good feeling. But I think that's that's when it's most tricky. So that's all I kind of have to add, but I don't necessarily have the answer to that part of it.
There's just no reason to go along to get along. That's what I'd say.
Yep.
And
Mhm.
sorry, just I think it plays back to the importance of vetting that person or those people again, because if you do, you're halfway up the skin track and you're realizing that their intentions are very different from yours, or maybe you've expressed that you're uncomfortable with the cloud coverage that's coming in, or the changing conditions, and they begin to kind of detach, or they're showing, I think Sienna brought it up earlier saying, if you feel pressured to do anything, that's immediately a red flag. It's really like it would really, I think both Evan and I talked about this earlier this week, but we've both had instances where we've gone out with people who we felt were going to be good partners, and soon enough we found that they weren't really on the same page as us. And I think my personal anecdote, like recently I was out with a couple friends who I've actually toured with before, and we had a storm roll in, and I'm a relatively risk averse person, especially when the conditions were like it was on this day. And it got super windy. I was not comfortable with the visibility, and I asked if we could transition and kind of ski down next to the skin track. And the two people I was with were not stoked about that. They had big plans to summit, and I mean, at that point, it just become like they pressured me into going, because the alternative is me turning around by myself. And I don't know if that's the right call, but it's just more reinforcement that I should have done a better job talking with them and making sure that we were going into it on a level playing field, and they would have made a similar choice as I would, because I ended up being uncomfortable and I came out safe, which is great, but that's not always the case. So
I think for the last few minutes, we have about 15 minutes left for this. And I think it'd be really good to transition into terrain. We had some of that prepared. I want to let all of you know, because we once again looking through all the comments, the last Backcountry Beta event that we had, we talked specifically about resources on places that you could find like backcountry terrain, like CalTopo, the different apps. So if you go into the Clubhouse and you go to the topic backcountry and you look for the recording from the last session, Jillian and Whitney got into that quite a bit, in terms of like, where can you go to find resources for terrain, but CalTopo came up. There's like various apps. We talked a lot about not necessarily having a big map, but having something on your phone, but then not relying on your phone, kind of knowing where you're going. And so I'm going to encourage, if you have specific questions on that, to go watch the last series, that recording's in the Clubhouse. But I think we should transition into talking about terrain specifically, and talk about terrain traps and red flags. So with your partners or partner, how do you identify terrain traps and red flags when you're in the backcountry? So what specifically are you looking for? What can you learn about the snowpack? And just let's get into that, terrain traps and red flags.
Oh yeah. Okay. So I'll say the disclaimer again that Jen mentioned at the beginning, but this is obviously not an Area 1 or Area 2. This does not replace education, but we are starting to get into some of kind of the backcountry lingo and things that you will go over in your Area 1 a lot. The terrain is definitely a big topic. And so I don't know if I should share. We could just send out these photos or do a Google search and look for terrain traps in backcountry, because there's some great diagrams out there. I am a graphic or visual learner for the most part, especially when it comes to just seeing what an actual terrain trap looks like. but
You're able to share. Did I give permissions for you to share?
let me try, because that will definitely. Oh no,
Okay, I got you. Okay, try now.
What? Okay, cool. I think it's gonna work.
It should.
Do you see
Yeah.
my screen? Okay,
Yes.
cool. So these were just, I did a quick search on Google. These were two that I specifically liked. Especially the first one, because you're actually looking at a mountain or a face. And not to say that everyone's mountain is going to look like this. This looks like a pretty awesome mountain. But it does give a really good idea of what, as you're skinning up, you can read the forecast all you want, but once you're on the snow, that's what really matters. It's all about what you're seeing firsthand. Things can change again rapidly depending on, the weather, the snow, a whole myriad of things can lead to, that forecast maybe not applying to where you are. So when we talk about terrain traps, it really, they're exactly kind of what the term would kind of indicate. So it's the terrain in a specific it's a specific area of terrain that may, if there were an avalanche, you would be trapped in it. That's probably not like the technical description, but I think it kind of gives you an idea. So if you're even in the resort, you can kind of picture what a terrain trap might be. If it's looking at this diagram as well, we're looking at up in the corner, the convexity. So you're kind of looking at a roll of some sort. The same goes for concavities, which is the opposite. Both of those are considered terrain traps, because if you were to trigger an avalanche, that snow would likely get you, with gravity and all those forces, it's going to end up somewhere and stop moving somewhere. And these terrain traps are more, it just increases the likelihood that the snow will stop in a certain spot and leave you buried there. So convexities and concavities are two examples of terrain traps. We're looking at as well cornices or wind slabs, definitely things that you should be on the lookout for, especially when you're going uphill, because you have a better view. Once you get to the top, I think a lot of people can attest to the view from the top is a lot different from the view from the bottom. So as you're going up, you definitely want to just kind of have a good idea of what that terrain looks like. Are there cliffs? Are there drops? Then you want to keep an eye out for any slides or previous avalanches. I think that one's a little bit more obvious, but still definitely something to bring up. Now we're looking at the other graphic, and I know that font's like teeny, but any sort of cliff or drop that ends in an abrupt flat, that's going to be a terrain trap, just because once you hit that flat, the snow has nowhere to go. Trees can also act as terrain traps as well. So if you're skiing above tree line and going into the trees, just imagine an avalanche carrying you, and then you get into a tree packed area. The snow is going to stop, and you are too. You definitely just want to be careful about where you're skiing and where you're approaching trees. And then some others that are, a little bit more obvious, but still worth bringing up are there gullies or ravines? A lot, especially out here in Oregon, where we're skiing on volcanoes, there's a lot of ravines and ridges, and there's definitely places where you could definitely get trapped. And cornices as well. Something that I think mostly will be seen on glaciers, but you can definitely see them when you have a large snowpack and the snow begins to break apart. This is just an introduction to terrain traps, but those are all things that as you're hiking and hopefully stopping here and there with your partner or group, you can kind of just go over what you're seeing. If you have concerns, point them out. I even like even if I don't see something concerning, I still like to be like, oh, look, like, here's where we're planning on coming down. Like, let's see what the snow coverage looks like on, there's a cliff there. There's like, here's how I think we should come down. Just kind of assessing what you're looking at and talking about it, because even if you're not concerned, there's still a lot of room to learn. And it's a great opportunity to learn about how your partner approaches descents as well. Kind of talking about how they would approach their line choice. I don't know. It's just to each their own, but I think definitely keeping an eye out on your way up it's probably my number one rule. As much as I like to put my head down and start hiking, it's once you start getting into avalanche terrain, it's great to keep your head up and eyes open.
One thing that I want to bring up, Catherine, if you want to exit your screen share. So Catherine and I are both in the maritime snowpack. That would be like West Coast. Evan, you're in continental snowpack, which is a completely different snowpack. And we haven't really gotten into that. And once again, these are things that you would really get into in your ARI class. And this is not designed to replace that. But Evan, do you want to talk specifically about things that you're looking for in a Colorado snowpack, and how like what you're looking for in a continental snowpack might be a little bit different than what we're thinking about in a maritime? And just for anybody who doesn't know what those terms are, depending on where you are at in the world, there's different snowpacks which are affected by the amount of moisture, elevation, like these various things that impact the snowpack. So you could just Google and find out what snowpack you exist in. Your snowpack will function very differently than another one. So our maritime snowpack here on the West Coast is going to be very different from the continental where Evan is. So Evan, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So if anyone else here is in my area of snowpack, it's very tricky. And honestly, generally, we're not able to do, and I'm very conservative in the backcountry, and we're not able to do a lot of the like maybe super steep and powder and all that till spring, because usually where the snow is where the danger, if you will, or the problem, which you would get into that in your area one too. But me and one of my partners who's actually on the call, Monica, we have pretty like strict things that we're not going to go where we are seeing the dangerous issue. And if we do, it's going to be super low angle. So we're looking for, and this is like not necessarily the bad thing we're looking for slopes that are going to be low angle and that are fun. We love low angle fun because we have so much wind, especially in Summit County, the area I'm in. So much wind makes really, really tricky loaded spots. So wind loading can create all these different pockets of complex areas where avalanches can happen. So a ton of wind and then a ton of sun, or a lot of sun. And so that makes things really tricky as well. So right now we have a pretty terrible base in our snowpack, and that means that it is so unstable and we have had so many avalanches. So if I were going out in the backcountry right now, really we'd like, if we were out on a tour, or like hiking around wanting to go ski, I honestly wouldn't be in some really high risk areas, but even so, avalanches can happen nearby, or in areas that you don't expect them to, especially with tricky snowpack. So as Catherine had mentioned, like any slides that have happened around you, then that's an indicator that maybe you're in a spot that might have a slide, especially like things above you or around you. And then like shooting cracks, like for me, that would be, I've had friends who are like, yeah, and then we were hiking along and there was cracks. And so, we kept going, but like, that's for me, like a turnaround. Like if there are shooting cracks, turn around and get out of there. Also, if there's like this happens in the springtime, like little bits of the slope on top of the snow are starting to go. It doesn't look like a whole slide, but it's just like a nice, perfect little teeny slab sliding off. like that's a big indicator that things are moving, especially when it like the weather is doing so many things to change it. There's kind of a lot of red flags here in in our area. Gosh, what's another? Oh, seeing like patchy snow, seeing dirt in itself, like that's kind of a big thing, that if you're looking up and there's just a bunch of dirt there, odds are that snowpack is even below where you can see a bunch of snow. It's probably not great. And that's a lot. I could go on about our snowpack as well. But those
The
are,
thing is, yeah, I mean, the thing for everyone to recognize is that there are different snowpacks across this continent and across this world. And so you have to know the snowpack that you're in because it's going to be very different.
yeah.
With that said, we've been here for an hour, friends. So our time is up. I want to thank Catherine and Evan for contributing to this conversation and answering all of these questions. I want to thank all of you for being here tonight and spending this hour with us. A couple things before we go. Number one, this recording will be made available on the Clubhouse. Because there's so much snow, I may not get to it till Monday. I can't promise anything. I'm going to be out. Like as soon as the resorts open, I'm out because the avalanche danger is extreme here. So I'm going to hit the resorts. But you will see this posted in the backcountry topic. The other thing that I want to say is, like I said, we haven't put together our 4th session yet. So if there are topics that have not been covered and you'd like for us to discuss them, you can reach out to us in the Clubhouse, and definitely check out the recordings from the first 2 to just see what maybe you might have missed. And then help us figure out what would be the things that you'd like for us to talk about for our fourth or fifth session. We do have a session coming up where we're going to be talking about Indigenous ways of understanding the snowpack. And so stay tuned for that. Working on putting that together now with one of our ambassadors, Denali. But yeah, let's reach out to any of us. Let us know what it is that you'd like for us to cover in future events. Once again, all of you here are on the Clubhouse. Go find each other, say hello. You can find each other easily on that members part to see who's near you, and just make sure to use your voice. Remember, it's important. Stay safe, and we will see you next time. And thanks, Evan and Catherine, again for making this happen.
Thank you, everyone, for coming out and listening to us.
Yes, thank you, Jen.
Pleasure. Now we get to do the Miss America wave. Goodbye. See you.
Bye.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Bye, everyone.